The screaming changed everything. It started at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday night in October, cutting through the silence of Maple Street like a knife through paper. I was 17, lying in bed scrolling through my phone when the sound made my blood freeze. It wasn't human screaming. It was something else entirely, something that made every instinct in my body scream run. But I couldn't move. I just lay there, paralyzed by the sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Our house sat at the end of a dead-end street, surrounded by woods that had always felt peaceful during the day, but menacing at night. The screaming came from those woods, echoing off the trees and bouncing back toward our windows like a sick game of telephone. My parents were out of town for their anniversary, leaving me alone with our ancient golden retriever, Max, who was now whimpering under my bed like he'd seen the devil himself. I grabbed my phone and called 911, but the line was busy. Busy. Who calls 911 at 2:47 on a Tuesday morning? I tried 3 more times before giving up, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The screaming had stopped by then, replaced by a silence that felt heavy and wrong. The kind of silence that comes after something terrible has happened, when even the crickets know to shut up and hide. Max refused to come out from under the bed, which should have been my first real warning. Dogs know things we don't. They can smell fear and death and danger in ways our dulled human senses never could. But I was 17 and stupid, and convinced I was brave enough to handle whatever was happening in those woods. I put on my sneakers and grabbed a flashlight, ignoring the way my hands trembled as I reached for the back door. The October air was crisp and sharp, carrying the smell of dead leaves and something else I couldn't identify. Something metallic and wrong that made my stomach turn. I stepped off our back porch and immediately felt like I was being watched. The feeling crawled up my spine like a spider, making the hair on my arms stand up. I should have gone back inside, should have locked the door and waited for morning. Instead, I walked toward the woods. The beam of my flashlight barely penetrated the darkness between the trees. Everything looked different at night, transformed into something alien and hostile. The familiar path I'd walked 1,000 times during daylight hours was now a maze of shadows and strange shapes that could have been rocks or logs or something much worse. I called out, "Hello?" But my voice sounded small and pathetic against the vastness of the night. That's when I saw the light. Not my flashlight, but something else deeper in the woods. A flickering orange glow that danced between the trees like fire. But it wasn't fire. Fire moves differently, chaotic and unpredictable. This light was steady, purposeful, like someone was carrying a lantern. I followed it deeper into the woods, my feet crunching through dead leaves that sounded loud as gunshots in the silence. The smell got stronger as I got closer to the light. Metallic and sweet and rotting all at once, like someone had left meat out in the sun for days. I covered my nose with my shirt, but it didn't help. The smell seemed to coat the inside of my mouth, making me gag with every breath. I should have turned back then. Should have run home and hidden under my covers until my parents came back. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and I was 17 and stupid. I found them in a clearing about half a mile from our house. 3 figures in dark clothes, standing in a circle around something I couldn't see clearly. They were chanting in a language I didn't recognize, their voices low and rhythmic like a heartbeat. The lantern sat in the center of their circle, casting dancing shadows that made everything look like a nightmare. I crouched behind a fallen log, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. One of the figures stepped forward, and in the flickering light I saw what they were gathered around. A deer. A beautiful doe that looked like she was sleeping except for the way her neck was bent at an impossible angle. Her eyes were still open, reflecting the lantern light like black mirrors. I bit my knuckle to keep from making a sound, tasting blood as my teeth broke the skin. These weren't teenagers playing pranks. This was something else entirely. The figure who had stepped forward raised something above their head. A knife, long and curved like a crescent moon. The blade caught the light as they brought it down, and the sound it made when it hit flesh was wet and final. I squeezed my eyes shut, but I could still hear everything. The chanting got louder, more urgent, and underneath it all was a sound like water running that I knew wasn't water at all. When I opened my eyes again, the deer was gone. Not moved, not dragged away, but gone like it had never been there at all. The three figures were still chanting, their hands raised toward the sky like they were calling down the moon itself. The air around them seemed to shimmer, like heat waves rising from summer pavement, and I felt something change in the woods around us. Something fundamental and wrong. That's when one of them turned and looked directly at me. Even with the distance and the darkness, I could see their eyes glowing like an animal's in the lantern light. They smiled, and I saw teeth that were too sharp, too many, filling a mouth that opened wider than any human mouth should. The other two turned then, and I realized with sick certainty that whatever these things were, they weren't human, had never been human. I ran, crashed through the woods like a wounded animal, branches tearing at my clothes and face, roots trying to trip me with every step. Behind me, I could hear them laughing, not chasing, just laughing like they knew something I didn't, like they knew I'd never really escape what I'd seen. The sound followed me all the way home, echoing through the trees long after I should have been out of earshot. I locked every door and window in the house, then sat in my bedroom with my back against the door and Max pressed against my legs. He was still shaking, still whimpering, like he could sense that whatever had been in those woods wasn't finished with us. I tried calling 911 again, but the line was still busy. Tried calling my parents, but their phones went straight to voicemail. The clock on my nightstand glowed 3:33 a.m., and outside the woods were silent again. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those teeth, those glowing eyes, the way the deer had simply vanished like it had never existed. I kept telling myself it was a dream, a nightmare brought on by too much caffeine and horror movies. But the scratches on my arms were real. The taste of blood in my mouth was real. The way Max refused to go near any window facing the woods was real. Morning came eventually, pale and gray through my bedroom windows. I made coffee with hands that still shook and sat at the kitchen table, staring out at the woods that looked completely normal in daylight, green and peaceful and harmless. But I knew better now. I knew what lived in those trees, what came out when the sun went down. The question was what I was going to do about it. I walked to the clearing that afternoon, telling myself I needed proof that it had really happened. The site looked undisturbed, just dead leaves and fallen branches scattered around like always. No scorch marks from the lantern, no blood stains from the deer, no footprints from the three figures who had stood here chanting in languages that shouldn't exist. It was like the whole thing had been erased, wiped clean like writing from a blackboard. But I found something they'd missed. A single feather, black as midnight and longer than my hand, caught in the bark of an oak tree about 6 feet off the ground. It was warm to the touch and seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. When I pulled it free, it left a mark on the tree that looked burned, like someone had pressed a branding iron against the bark. I wrapped it in a towel and took it home, not sure why, but knowing I needed to keep it. That night, they came to my house. I was lying in bed pretending to read when I heard the scratching at my window. Soft at first, like tree branches in the wind, then more insistent. When I looked outside, I saw them standing in my backyard. 3 figures in dark clothes, their faces hidden by hoods that cast shadows deeper than the night around them. They weren't moving, just standing there watching my window. I called 911 again, and this time someone answered. 911, what's your emergency? The voice was calm and professional, completely normal after the insanity of the past 24 hours. There are people in my backyard, I whispered. 3 people just standing there watching my house. There was a pause, then the dispatcher asked for my address. I gave it to her, spelled it out twice to make sure she got it right. Officers are on their way, she said. Stay on the line with me. Can you describe these individuals? I looked out the window again, and they were gone. Just gone. Like they'd melted into the shadows between one heartbeat and the next. They're not there anymore, I said, feeling foolish. They were just here. I swear they were just here. The dispatcher was patient, professional, asking if I wanted the officers to still come by and check the area. The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. They walked around the house with flashlights, checking windows and doors, looking for signs of intruders. They found nothing, of course. No footprints in the soft earth under my bedroom window. No disturbance in the carefully raked leaves of our backyard. They took my statement with the weary patience of people who dealt with scared teenagers on a regular basis. "You've been watching too many horror movies," the older officer said as they prepared to leave. "Maybe lay off the late-night Netflix for a while." He meant it kindly, but it stung anyway. I wasn't some hysterical kid making up stories for attention. I knew what I'd seen. I knew what was happening in those woods. But knowing and proving were 2 very different things, and I was learning that the hard way. After the police left, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and staring at the feather I'd found in the clearing. It was beautiful in a terrible way, so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When I touched it, I could swear I heard voices whispering in that same strange language from the night before. Voices that seemed to be coming from inside my own head, speaking words I didn't understand, but somehow felt the meaning of.